Hi folks, it's Dawn from Quilliam Minis, and I'm here to share a quick video on how to do miniature grapes with polymer clay. Here are a couple different colors and a couple different finishes. Here's a small bunch of grapes. The key to doing any food in polymer clay is translucent clay. The amount of translucent really shows up when you're doing miniature food. So you can see like these miniatures are older miniatures that I've done, and they look a little bit lifeless. And that's because I didn't use much translucent in them at all. So they look a little bit flat. But once you add translucent, you can see that it comes to life. For grapes, you want to take out of your polymer clay. So here's what the polymer clay normally looks like. It's usually divided into quarters. And you want to take about a half of one of those quarters. This is not an exact recipe because every color is slightly different. Even if I give you the names, it's slightly different. And then you want to take a tiny bit of green and then a tiny bit of yellow to mix in with that. So hopefully you can see that this is about a 1/4 inch of green, a 1/4 inch by an 1/8 inch. And then this is 1/8 inch by an 1/8 inch by a 1/4 inch. And you want to mix that really well. Once your clay is fully mixed or mostly mixed, then I would separate this into a couple of small batches. The reason for this is that even if you've done a color mixture before, it's always a good idea to test this out. And I have a tendency to make things and then test it out, which is not the right order to do that. But make sure you make a few small grapes to start and then test that out in your toaster oven. So to get just a few test grapes, just create a small log and then try to cut them as evenly as possible. So I have my grid up here, but I will cut it down here so you can see. I put this white background on to make it a little bit clearer for you because I know the glare on the glass can be a little much. Now, once you've done that and you have, these are massive grapes, these are obviously not the correct size. The easiest way to roll these out is to use an acrylic stamp mount. So something like this. Now you don't have to do this, but I find that this is a nice, easy way to roll a bunch of these all at once. Make sure that they are all separated from each other. So this gives you the start, but then after that, you just want to go through by hand, making sure that it's a perfect circle at first, and then roll it just back and forth a little bit to get that oblong shape. So you can see those grapes are way too big, but this is just to show you the technique. So you want to roll it until it gets into a perfect globe, and then one last roll to get that oblong shape. And once you have all of those, test these in your toaster oven. I would test them 15 minutes at 275, which is what most polymer clays are, but test your own oven. Some ovens, it's really difficult to judge how hot they are because it is a toaster oven. For the test fires, I like to use just smaller pieces of tile. These are glass tiles that I got at Lowe's. And what's great about that is you can line up a bunch of these and test out different times. So you can put all of these on your larger tile. And so you can test different times and different formulations, and you can keep them separate. Once you've tested them, then I suggest to make a bunch of these, use an extruder. I like this kind of extruder that has the twist top better than the push ones, just because you can control it a little bit more easily. And for the grapes, I would use a larger hole. For things like green beans, I would use a smaller hole like that. And as always, before you use any tools, make sure that you use your baby wipes to completely clean these. Even if they look clean, even if you think this is clean, there's always a little bit of clay hanging out at the rim. So be sure to clean those as best you can. And because we're just doing one small thing of grapes, I'm just going to put a little bit of clay in here and then put the top on. So we have this. Let's get the top. And don't forget to clean out the inside of the screw top. The unfortunate thing about extruders like this is that you have a little lip here, so you can't cut flush. But I find having the control is more important than be able to cut flush. And then once you have that, then you're all set to create some snakes, as it were. Now we don't need a ton of these, so I'm just gonna cut right here and set this off to the side. The key for making the grapes and to make it look as realistic as possible is to get the correct size. The best way to do that, of course, is to measure. But another way to do that is to make a bunch of them and then line up 12 in a row and see if those are going to be a little bit too big or a little bit too small. So actually get a grape and set it next to it. And so you can see this one is probably, I mean, I like the bigger grapes, but even with this might be a little bit too big. So we'll make them this size instead. I don't know if you can see that. I have two sizes in here, sort of like monster grapes, normal size grapes. In order to cut them more evenly, it's good to use a grid, which is why I prefer to have this glass grid that you can cut on. So even though the grid is a little bit larger than what I would prefer, it's actually quite helpful. And I would line up maybe 2 of these or so. And then again, make sure that you clean this. I just cleaned this and cut these. In this case, I'm cutting about a 1/2 inch or an 1/8 inch. Once those are cut, again, my tip to you, I'm gonna scoop these up and put them back on the paper over here, my non-paper paper. This is actually styrene, one of my favorite materials. Again, you want to separate these as best you can. You can roll them in your hand, of course, but I find it's useful to roll them all at once. And so you want to make sure that they're separated a little bit and then get out your handy dandy stamp mount. And there are, you know, a huge variety of these. I know Michael's always has these. But for these, you just want to roll until they're roughly circular. And if some aren't rolling, that's okay. Just take the ones that you can get. And then remember, just do one more roll on that to get the more oblong shape. And that will help you create these more quickly than you otherwise would. If I had to pick every single one of these up, it would take forever. But by doing it on this stamp mount, I'm going to be able to get most of these done in a relatively short amount of time. And then once those are done, the reason why I have multiple stamp mounts, oftentimes I'll leave them on here until I want to pull them. So let me do one more rolling around for these, and then I'll show you how I tend to put the grapes together into a stem or a bunch. So let me put these like this, and then again, we'll just take these and roll them together. You want to try and keep it as even as possible. I know I have a tendency to lean on one side, and that's just natural. Sometimes you'll end up with ones that look like a little bit of a diamond. It's okay if they're imperfections because most of these are going to be hidden within. You just want to make sure you have enough, they have one good side to them that you can use in your bunches. So again, if you don't have a stamp mount, you can just use your fingers and then do that last roll on the paper. All right, for the stem for these, remember you want to use translucent. This was about half translucent. And so you can see that even with that, it's a little bit too dark. So I would suggest doing a little bit more than what I did. But to be honest, it's not as critical as it is with the grapes. So for these, just do a tiny bit of the translucent and the brown together. So once that's mixed together, what I would then do is take another piece of brown, just the tiniest sliver, and add a little bit in, and then mix it just a tiny bit so that you can get some variation within that stalk. You don't have to do this. I think it tends to look a little bit more realistic if there are stripes in there. And so you just want to mix it up a little bit, and you can see it's hardly noticeable now, but once you pull that out, the brown that has the translucent in it will become much more noticeable. So I'm just going to fold this a couple times, and you can see a tiny bit of the stripes. It'll become a little bit more clear once you pull that out. And this got super soft, which I do not like super soft clay, but that's okay. One thing that may help is to pre-bake your stem. And so I'm just going to do a simple stem here. Pre-baking is good so that you don't deform the stem while you're putting the grapes on it. And by pre-baking, I mean bake it for about 1/3 of the time that you would normally bake everything else. Once you do that, you should have it hard enough that it's not going to deform while you're making those. And what I like to do is to put the stem down and then create the upper half of it, laying all the grapes on, do a tiny pre-bake, flip it over, place the other grapes on. The reason why it's good to pre-bake this is because after you do that upper half and you flip it over, you don't want the bottom to be deformed. So I know it takes a little bit more time when you're adding in those pre-baking steps, but it really does help so you don't deform the project. So let's grab our stems, and the easiest way to do this is to use either a dotting tool to pick these up, so you can just gently grab them on the sides, or use your fingers. It doesn't really matter. The key though, if you're not doing, so to build up the grape, what I suggest is that you put it on the block that you're going to bake it on, and then either use a dotting tool or a knife to gently pick up your grapes one at a time and place them right on there. Now, you're going to deform it if you use the tool, so using your hand might be slightly better, but it can be really hard. I purposely made these a little bit bigger to show, because I know it's really hard to see on the video unless I super zoom in. But you want to be sure that you're not deforming these, and that can be really tricky. So I'm going to go ahead and just fast forward through here and put all of the grapes right on. Remember that you're not going to use a glue on this. There's no glue that we're using. We're just using sticking these together. And so when you're doing a project like that, it really is important that you do stick them together. So even though it may deform the grapes just a little bit as you're doing this, you do need to make sure that they're stuck together. In general, you should use a liquid clay anytime you're trying to glue two pieces of polymer clay together via an oven. And so when you're doing that, you want to make sure that you have the smallest amount of that polymer clay as possible, the liquid polymer clay. And the reason for that is it will show up, depending on what kind of liquid polymer clay you have, it will show up and it'll make the project look a little bit odd. And so as you're doing these, keep that in mind. So this is just half of this. And remember, we're going to pre-bake this and then add the other half to the back. Now, if you're going to drape this over a basket or something, then you want to use tin foil to create sort of that curve that you're going to bake that on. And you can use the grapes that you pre-baked. So these are the grapes that I pre-baked earlier. Let me pull them off the glass there. And you'll notice that these are a little bit glossy, and that's because this particular formula is a little bit shinier than some of the others. But here is my pro tip to get them glossy. Most of them end up looking a little bit dull. So you can see like these are really dull. It's a matte surface, not a gloss surface. So when you are done with your grapes, I think one of the easiest ways to add a little bit of gloss is to use a wax. You can certainly spray it with an acrylic spray, but I found that using the wax works out really well. So I just put a little bit on a brush, and then you're going to just brush it all over the grapes. And I know this looks like a lot, and it is, but it will end up completely coating the grapes. So use the brush so you can sort of get into the cracks and crevices. But as you continue doing this, you'll find that it will really get in and create that shine. So hopefully you can see that those grapes are a little bit shinier and look a little bit more like real grapes. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Remember, I didn't show you the other half, but once you pull the other half of these out, just flip it over, put the grapes on the same exact way. To show you another way to more easily put the grape bunches together. This, of course, is after you pick up each of the individual pieces, just making them a little bit more oblong, a little bit longer. And once you have all of those done, then you can use a tool. I prefer using a slightly curved blade. And that curved blade you use just to push up against the clay, just enough to pick it up. So here you scoop it up and it should stick just enough that you can place each of these pieces relatively easily. I know I showed you how to pick everything up with your fingers because I assume most everybody has fingers in which to do this, but I thought I would give you this technique because it is a lot faster once you get used to it. And as always, I hope you have fun and keep making minis. Thanks.